I cheated because you weren't enough. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look ashamed. She just sat there, arms crossed, calm, like she was explaining a delayed bill, not confessing to blowing up our marriage. My stomach dropped, but her face didn't change. No apology. No hesitation. Just certainty. You pushed me to it, she added. Any woman would have done the same. That was the moment something snapped in my head. Not rage, clarity. I realized she wasn't scared of losing me. She wasn't even defending herself. She was rewriting reality in real time, placing the blame neatly in my hands, like it belonged there all along. I asked her how long. She rolled her eyes. Why does that matter? You're focusing on the wrong thing. Wrong thing. That's when I understood this wasn't just about sex or another man. Emotional loyalty had already been gone. She wasn't confessing. She was sentencing me. And the worst part? She genuinely believed I deserved it. I remember thinking, if she feels this justified, this marriage has been dead for a while. And I was the last one to know. Before everything collapsed, our marriage looked normal. Not perfect, but solid enough that I never thought infidelity was even on the table. We worked, paid bills, talked about the future. Friends saw us as stable. I saw us as a team. I was the one who adjusted, who compromised. If she was tired, I picked up the slack. If she was distant, I told myself it was stress. I believed marriages had phases, and this was just one of them. I never questioned her loyalty, because I never questioned her. She used to say I was reliable. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I hear what she really meant. Predictable, safe, easy to ignore. I didn't notice when appreciation turned into expectation. When effort became something she felt entitled to, not grateful for. Looking back, the marriage didn't break suddenly. It slowly tilted. I was still leaning in, still trying to hold us steady, while she had already started leaning away. I just didn't know yet that she was preparing herself to justify what she would later do. And that's the part that hurts the most. I wasn't a bad husband in a failing marriage. I was a loyal husband in a marriage that had already decided to betray me. The changes weren't dramatic. That's why I ignored them. She started guarding her phone, not hiding it, just keeping it face down. Passwords changed. Notifications stopped lighting up the screen. When I asked, she laughed and said I was being paranoid. I believed her, because trusting her was easier than facing what doubt would mean. Her tone changed too. Conversations felt rushed, transactional. I'd talk about my day and watch her nod without listening, already somewhere else. Compliments disappeared. Affection felt scheduled, almost forced, like something she checked off a list. She also became strangely defensive. Simple questions turned into arguments. Why are you interrogating me? She'd snap. I wasn't interrogating. I was trying to connect. But every attempt made me feel like I was crossing a line I didn't know existed. The worst part? I explained it all away. Stress. Work. Life. I told myself real marriages weren't perfect. That love meant patience. What I didn't realize was that patience was only being asked of one of us. Those subtle changes weren't random. They were preparation. She was emotionally leaving long before she physically cheated. And I helped her by refusing to see it. There were red flags. Clear ones. I just kept repainting them a softer color. She started going out more, always with vague explanations. Just friends. Work stuff. You wouldn't be interested. When I asked who was going, she'd sigh like I was exhausting. I told myself I didn't want to be that husband, the insecure one. She compared me to others more often. Not directly, but enough. Mark's husband actually listens. My coworker's partner plans surprises. Each comment landed like a small cut. I absorbed them quietly, thinking if I tried harder, she'd stop looking elsewhere. Intimacy became inconsistent. When I noticed, she blamed stress. When I pulled back, she accused me of being distant. Somehow, no matter what I did, it was wrong, but never her fault. The biggest red flag was how easily she dismissed my feelings. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. Why are you always making problems? I learned to doubt my own instincts instead of questioning her behavior. Those red flags weren't confusing. I made them confusing because I wanted the marriage to survive. And in doing that, I taught her I would explain away anything, including betrayal. The first real moment didn't come with proof. It came with a feeling I couldn't shake. We were sitting on the couch, close enough that our legs touched, but it felt like there was a wall between us. I said something stupid, trying to make her laugh. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her whole expression changed. Softer, warmer, alive. She noticed me watching and instantly locked the screen. "What?" she snapped. "Nothing," I said, but everything inside me tightened. Later that night, I asked her if something was going on. I wasn't accusing, just asking. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. "I can't believe you'd think that," she said coldly. "That says more about you than me." I apologized. That's the part that still messes with me. Lying there in the dark, I realized I felt like a guest in my own marriage. Like I was interrupting something I wasn't supposed to see. That was the first time I understood. Whatever was happening, I was already on the outside. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. After that night, her behavior didn't just change, it hardened. She became colder, sharper. Conversations turned into inconveniences. If I asked how her day was, she answered without looking up. If I wanted to talk, she'd sigh like I was wasting her time. It felt like everything about me suddenly annoyed her. She started picking fights over nothing. The way I chewed, the way I parked, the way I asked questions. And every argument ended the same way, with her saying I was too much or exhausting. I began to feel like I had to earn basic kindness. What really shifted was her respect, or rather, the lack of it. She spoke to me like someone she had already checked out from. There was no warmth, no softness, just impatience. Like I was holding her back from a life she felt entitled to. I didn't know it then, but this was the emotional detachment phase. She was distancing herself so she wouldn't feel guilty later. So when she finally crossed the line, she could tell herself I deserved it. And the scariest part? She wasn't hiding it anymore. She didn't think she had to. The lies weren't dramatic. That's what made them unsettling. She'd say she was working late, but her paycheck never changed. She'd claim a friend needed her, yet couldn't remember basic details about that emergency the next day. Stories shifted slightly each time I asked, never enough to confront, but enough to leave a residue of doubt. Once, she said she was at a coworker's birthday dinner. I later heard that coworker was out of town. When I mentioned it casually, her face tightened for half a second before she snapped. "Why are you checking up on me?" I wasn't checking. I was noticing. The timelines didn't line up. Her explanations had gaps she rushed past. When I slowed things down, she accused me of trying to control her. Somehow, her inconsistencies became my character flaw. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't lying to protect me. She was lying because she didn't respect me enough to tell the truth. The lies weren't sloppy because she was careless. They were sloppy because she didn't think I'd push back. And she was right. At least, back then. By the time the affair actually started, the marriage was already empty. She stopped sharing things with me. Not big secrets, small, everyday thoughts. The kind couples used to exchange without thinking. I'd tell her something personal and get a nod. No follow-up. No curiosity. It felt like talking to someone who was already halfway out the door. Physical closeness disappeared first. Hugs became brief. Kisses felt obligatory. When I reached for her, she stiffened, then accused me of making everything about sex. But it wasn't sex I missed. It was connection. She started treating me like a roommate who asked too many questions. Her emotional energy went somewhere else. I could feel it. She laughed more at her phone than with me. Her eyes lit up for messages that weren't mine. That's when I understood something painful. Cheating doesn't begin in bed. It begins when respect and intimacy are withdrawn and given to someone else instead. By the time she crossed the physical line, she had already convinced herself that I no longer mattered. I was still married to her. She was already gone. I didn't catch her in the act. It was worse than that. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, buzzing nonstop while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. I was irritated. I just wanted it to stop. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize and a message preview I couldn't unsee. Last night was worth the risk. My hands went cold. My heart didn't race. It sank. I unlocked the phone without thinking. My code still worked. That detail alone said more than the messages did. There it was. Weeks of conversations. Flirting that turned explicit. Plans. Jokes about me. About how checked out I was. About how she deserved happiness. No confusion. No ambiguity. Just proof. What shocked me most wasn't the sex. It was how comfortable she was lying. How natural it looked on the screen. This wasn't a mistake. This was a parallel life she had built while coming home to me every night. When she walked out of the bathroom and saw my face, she didn't scream. She didn't panic. She just sighed. That's when I knew. She wasn't sorry I found out. She was annoyed that she had to deal with it. I held the phone out to her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said his name. For a second, she froze. Then her shoulders dropped, like she was tired of pretending. So you went through my phone, she said flatly. Not I'm sorry. Not let me explain. That was her first move, turning it on me. I asked her how long it had been going on. She shrugged. Does it matter? That answer hurt more than the truth ever could. I asked her why. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, because you weren't there for me. I reminded her of everything I'd done. The years, the effort, the patience. She waved it off. That's the bare minimum, she said. You don't get credit for that. That's when she said it. Calmly, confidently. I cheated because of you. In that moment, I realized this conversation wasn't about accountability. It was about justification. She needed me to be the villain so she could live with what she'd done. And she was perfectly comfortable sacrificing me to protect her self-image. After the confrontation, she doubled down. Every conversation turned into a twisted courtroom where I was always on trial. If I brought up the cheating, she accused me of living in the past. If I asked for honesty, she said I was controlling. Somehow, her betrayal became my obsession, and that was the real problem. She told me I was insecure, that I pushed her away with my questions, that my need for clarity was proof I'd always been like this. When I reminded her of the messages, the lies, the planning, she shook her head and said, "You're exaggerating. It wasn't that serious." That was the most damaging part, the minimization. She acted like I was overreacting to something inevitable, like cheating was a natural response to disappointment, not a choice she made again and again. I started questioning my own memory, my own reactions. I caught myself wondering if maybe I had driven her to it. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt reality just enough to keep the other person comfortable. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted absolution without accountability, and she wanted me to provide it. After weeks of blaming, justifying, and rewriting history, something inside me finally gave out. I stopped arguing. Not because I agreed with her, because I was exhausted. I'd lie awake at night replaying every conversation, every accusation, every moment where I tried to explain my pain and was told I was the problem. My chest felt heavy all the time, like I was carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. I barely recognized myself. I flinched at notifications. I second-guessed every thought. Even silence felt loud. I'd stare at the wall and wonder how I became the villain in a story where I never cheated, never lied, never walked away. The worst part was the loneliness. Not being alone with her. Sleeping next to someone who had already detached, who looked at me with annoyance instead of empathy. I realized I was grieving the marriage while still trapped inside it. That collapse wasn't weakness. It was my mind finally rejecting the lie I'd been living in. And once it broke, it couldn't be put back together. The decision didn't come with confidence. It came with emptiness. One night, mid-argument, I realized I was begging someone who didn't want to understand me. Every explanation I gave was twisted. Every feeling I shared was dismissed. I was chasing accountability from a person who had already decided I was disposable. I stopped talking. Not out of strategy. Out of self-preservation. I stopped defending myself. Stopped asking questions I knew she wouldn't answer honestly. Stopped trying to remind her who I was to her. The silence unsettled her at first. She asked why I was being cold. I almost laughed. For the first time, I chose not to react. I chose not to fix. I chose not to chase someone who had already proven they would rather justify betrayal than face it. That's when something shifted. I felt lighter. Not healed, but no longer trapped. Walking away emotionally didn't mean I stopped caring. It meant I stopped sacrificing my dignity to keep someone comfortable with their own wrongdoing. And once I made that decision, there was no going back. Once I stopped chasing, distance settled in naturally. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt like sharing space with a stranger. Conversations became brief and practical. No arguments. No explanations. Just logistics. Who's paying what? Who's home when? The emotional cord was already cut. I was just finally acknowledging it. She noticed the change. Not with concern, but irritation. My silence took away the role she had assigned me. The confused husband, the one begging for answers. Without that dynamic, she seemed almost bored. Like a performance that lost its audience. I stopped asking where she was going. Stopped checking my phone. Stopped caring about stories that never made sense anyway. The detachment wasn't cruel. It was protective. Every boundary I placed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she had slowly eroded. That's when I understood something important. Distance isn't punishment. It's clarity. It's what happens when you finally see someone as they are, not who you hoped they'd be. By the time she realized I was emotionally gone, I had already accepted that the marriage was over. I didn't leave with closure. I left with clarity. There was no final apology. No moment where she suddenly understood the damage she caused. What I got instead was something more valuable, the understanding that I couldn't heal in a place where accountability didn't exist. I stopped trying to make sense of her reasons. Cheating doesn't come from confusion. It comes from entitlement, from the belief that your desires matter more than the person who trusted you. And blaming me was just the last way she avoided facing who she had become. Here's what I learned, and what I wish someone had told me sooner. When someone cheats and says it's your fault, believe what that tells you about them. When someone says they owe you nothing, take them seriously. Loyalty without respect isn't love. It's self-betrayal. Walking away wasn't giving up on the marriage. It was choosing not to abandon myself anymore. If you're reading this and recognizing your own story, stop chasing explanations from someone who already justified hurting you. The moment you reclaim your self-respect is the moment their power over you ends.